Welcome to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. Wherever you're watching, listening to this, make sure to like, subscribe, rate, all that kind of cool stuff. But this week, where are we at, Charles?
Vegas.
We are at the Bellagio Hotel, and we're going to take you behind the scenes on the carrier side of the industry from a recruiting perspective and kind of show you around, see what it looks like, interview some carriers.
Think about this as the behind the scenes in Vegas.
What kind of bird do you think that is?
They spelled Italy wrong. Bunch of idiots.
You know, we're talking a lot of good stuff here at the Tenstreet User Conference in Vegas, and I couldn't think of any better people to have on right now to talk about it than Tenstreet itself. So we got Brian and Tim over here from Tenstreet to talk about a couple of exciting things that they're rolling out and focused on.
Awesome. It's good to be here, man.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's kick this off. You know, Tenstreet's a big player in the industry behind the scenes to make it accessible for drivers to apply, give a platform for carriers to run all their stuff on. And I mean, there is a lot of bells and whistles here. So
not to mention the Intel app. You know, I mean, that's like the most that's like the gold standard. You fill it out once, and then you've got your application there, unless you have to update it for like indefinitely.
Yeah. I mean, Brian, what you deal with this every day. I mean, Intel app. What's the important things, the bullet points on that?
So Tenstreet is designed honestly to connect the drivers to carriers. And that is communication. And it's communication all the way through, not just the hiring process. In the hiring process, the marketing process, Charles, as you know, is extremely important. Yeah. But it's not only pre-hire, but it's also post-hire. But the Intelli app is the number one way for a truck driver in the trucking industry to find a job. And the power behind it is the fact that the drivers agreed to allow us to store their data, protect their data. They don't have to remember all of their work history, which is a pain. I mean, nobody's going to remember 10 years, 10, 15 years of work history.
Exact dates.
They don't need a password because it's personal information that they put in order to get into the Pulse app and to fill out applications. Pre-population comes in, all the consents, everything can be done through the Pulse driver's app. So honestly, Tenstreet is built for the driver to make his job easier, to make their job easier, to give access to, when they're looking for a job, to carriers that are looking for good quality drivers. And the drivers, I mean, we've got millions of drivers in Tenstreet, right? And so a couple 100,000, 250,000 active drivers every month using the Pulse app.
I understand the power of Pulse because I've used it. You know, rather than getting on a phone call where someone's going to constantly try to sell me stuff that I've already bought into. That's why I filled out the app.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I don't need you to reframe this in a positive light. Just process my shit and get me approved. So when we're doing this, Pulse was a tool. I was able to upload my CDL. I was able to upload my med card. If they made an update, say I made a bonehead move and I forgot to update my app and then they ran a report and it came back, I'm just like, oh, cool. I forgot that they'd added in. They send me a confirmation. I'd sign it. I mean, it was pretty seamless process. It was smooth. I enjoyed it. Not to mention, hey, back in the day, I filled out an entire app. It took time. And then I had to go to this website, fill out an entire app, then go to this website. Now I did one and I can do 30 apps. I can find the most competitive person, not to mention the one that actually wants me because they're responding quickly.
Well, and in the driver's Pulse app, they can get notified of jobs that fit their experience and their profile. Pulse match, which the smart carriers do that because they're looking for certifications, whatever it may be, certain type of experience. You can put those keywords in your marketing and they ping that driver and let them know, hey, somebody's looking for a driver like me.
Tim, you know, we talk about Pandora's box here. You got some exciting stuff regarding Tenstreet and things that they're doing and initiatives you have. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, there's a couple things on the engagement side, the surveys and the rewards. You know, rewards for drivers have been something that we know is fruitful and beneficial, and the drivers like them. And reward programs are sometimes very difficult to manage. A lot of times carriers will try to do it themselves. So we've created Tenstreet Rewards, and I think the drivers are going to love it. Early feedback is strong, but you're going to start seeing sweepstakes opportunities, There'll be opportunities for drivers to enroll in sweepstakes that should be not only fun but rewarding. And then there's going to be opportunities for carriers to be able to run their own sweepstakes and their own contests. But, recognition, as Brian's talking about the communication issues with drivers, communication's big, but recognition and lack of recognition is a big deciding element in a driver when he feels that level of disrespect to the point where, hey, I'm doing my job and I'm not. You remember when you're a driver, you can have a bad load, and that chart that we looked at this morning that basically indicates that a driver's in the market 3 times a year. That didn't surprise me, right? Because how many times does a driver get frustrated and just might check out the market, had a bad load, had a bad experience or whatever. But what if we were to start using rewards and start using positive affirmation? And so it's super exciting. We're in the early stages of the Tenstreet Rewards. We still have a great rewards program through the Legacy Stay Metrics program. But what this new Tenstreet Rewards is the next version of that. And it's going to allow drivers to be rewarded by multiple entities. They'll be able to get points from a carrier. They'll be able to get points from vendors. They'll be able to get points from Tenstreet for doing specific things. So it's a wonderful recognition program that we think that drivers are going to like, a rewards program.
Ed, we just had some great talks about the big things Tenstreet's doing, and we talked about Pandora's box essentially being Tenstreet in trucking. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing to add to that plethora of things that you guys do.
Yeah, I'm the director of sales side for Tenstreet. In True Fuel specifically, and Brian has a great segue here, right? So we talked about onboarding and recruiting and things like that, and then of course we started to talk about rewards. But what are the metrics that we start to reward upon, right? And obviously one of the big topics right now is fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Drivers obviously have a very large influence over fuel consumption in the trucks today, even in the latest and greatest stuff. And of course, we're seeing a way that we can accurately assess a driver's performance around fuel. And then, of course, we can reward to that, right? So it really does start to paint a bigger picture in terms of driver retention, right? Keeps drivers happy, keeps them on board, lets them know how they're doing in terms of performance or specifically around fuel. And it's something we've been playing in this realm for quite some time, right? We're not the new kids on the block in terms of fuel efficiency. We were actually acquired by Tenstreet about a year ago, but we have long roots in terms of understanding fuel consumption, fuel efficiency, things like that, all through trucking. This coaching aspect of having a driver have the ability to understand, what areas of fuel consumption they can make an impact on is really what makes a difference, right? And those things are things like speeding and over revving and idling or opportunities for cruise control. Those type of things that the driver has a direct impact on can dramatically, reduce fuel consumption.
And it's not just the consumption part, it's the education behind it, but also the reward, the incentive. Why would this person go the extra mile to save someone money when they're not getting a portion of it? So I think it's important that you guys put together this reward program and this program all together with True Fuel to not only reward them for it, but also give them something to look at to see how they're doing. Because there's nothing worse than being held to a bar and then waiting to the end of the quarter to find out if you hit it or not.
Yeah, you guys probably already know this, right? So drivers are very competitive people. Right?
No.
So when we start to talk in this realm, we've seen historically drivers have an opportunity to start to share some of these results with them, with their peers. And that drives performance. And the way we do it, it's in a fair metric, right? We're not just looking at MPG, right? We're looking at more of this efficiency rating and the things that they can control. And that's what really kind of sets it apart.
So one question, just because a lot of this is from the concept of how the sausage is made and that kind of stuff, and giving drivers kind of a back end look at a lot of this. So with that, how do you track the driver's efficiency? What is the process of actually tracking the data to be able to give that analysis to the driver?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have multiple levels of this service, right? So, and we're here today at User Conference, we're talking about some of the levels that fall in or around the silver and bronze level. which specifically work around the Pulse app, right? So we're utilizing the driver's Pulse app to be able to pull some of this data. And then because we've been doing this for so long, we have some very unique modeling things that we can look back at and understand fuel behavior. And therefore we can come up with an efficiency metric. Now we also have a higher gold tier level where we're very much integrated into some existing ELD providers, right? So some folks like Geotab, Trimble, Platform Science, where we're directly have software living on the device. We're plugged directly into the truck's ECM. You know, we're seeing information in real time in terms of what type of fuel consumption is coming from that truck. And then, of course, what that driver's doing to change it.
There's a lot that goes into this, a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, a lot of data. I mean, just in the conversations we've had with Tenstreet alone, there's a lot of thought process. So I appreciate you dropping some of that knowledge, sharing it with our viewers. I appreciate you coming on the show, and good luck in Vegas.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So now we're here with Robert Pearson again with Mesilla Valley, and we always value our time with Robert because he, of all phrases I could do, keeps it real. So Robert, I see you with your cool shades on in here, keeping it real today.
I'm just keeping it real. Just keeping it real. One of the things we're doing here, you know, our audience is primarily drivers, and, you know, they get targeted with the ads. They, you know, get the recruiting propositions and stuff, and we figured we'd give them kind of a behind the scenes of how the sausage is made. So from a carrier perspective, and, you know, you're usually a lot more driver friendly than some. And so with that, I would ask you, like, what is the purpose of coming here? Like, is it just a bunch of, you know, suits coming and hanging out in Vegas and losing a bunch of money?
No.
Like, what do we do?
Work.
What happens here?
We are in the relationship business. More than anything else, moving freight from point A to point B, we are in the relationship business. Literally, my paycheck comes from what drivers do. And we have to execute on a very high level. When I have a problem, I literally can go 10 feet and go see my boss. If I have a driver that is 1,500 miles away from the terminal, my ability to execute on a relationship becomes unbelievably important. I can't leave anything to chance. And that starts from the recruiting process. So at a conference like this, why we come here is that onboarding process of physically, how do I get a driver's attention? Once I get that driver's attention, how do I make sure he doesn't feel like he's part of an assembly line, him or her? So that becomes really, really important, because if I'm not organized, if I don't have a process in place, best practices in place, I could easily forget about somebody, or I could not give them the experience and the time that they need with me, or I could very easily overlook something that to that driver is really important. And yeah, I may have a good sized orientation, but if there's one or two people in that orientation that made it that far into the process, but feel like they weren't a VIP coming in through the door, I have a problem with the process. So ultimately, why we come to a conference like this, and Tenstreet being the foremost expert as far as an applicant tracking system in our industry, is it allows us to focus on those little things. They aren't sexy. They're not exciting to talk about. But if you don't do them, your process looks really, really ugly, really quick. So it's just an important way for us to make sure, are we crossing our T's? Are we dotting our I's? And if we do that, the driver on the other side of that relationship should look at this and go, this was pretty easy. I got on board. They answered all my questions. I got in the orientation here, and now we're starting a fruitful relationship right from the beginning. That's where that becomes really important, and it starts with the processes that we lay out here today.
When you come to these things, obviously you're trying to look at in your phrase alone, is my baby ugly, and how could I not make it so ugly? Is there something that stands out specifically this year in this current market that's really like, I really want to hear about this?
Yeah. I think the biggest process is speed of service.
Okay.
That driver, on average, the average driver talks to 8.3 other recruiters than myself. And so I have to stand out versus those 8.3 other recruiters. Part of that is giving a yes as quickly as possible and giving a positive, accurate, no BS yes. Not that I feel good, but literally I can tell a driver, hey, your qualifications meet our qualifications for us. We're partners here. Let's move forward, and give that definitive yes. That happens with that process of being able to tell somebody yes and not have them come to orientation and then, 2 days later going, sorry, you don't qualify here, and sending them home.
That is the worst.
Oh, I don't win in that situation. They don't win in that situation. And honestly, it's pretty unprofessional. The goal should be to never have that happen.
Absolutely.
Is it possible that it might happen? It is, but that should be the exception to the rule, because it doesn't work well for the carrier, and it possibly takes somebody who's in a pretty good job and puts them now in a very bad position.
In case someone doesn't know, can you kind of explain like what you primarily use Tenstreet for?
Yeah. Applicant tracking system is probably the best way to word it here, is essentially no matter where you find the ad, if you find it in a job board, in a Google pay-per-click, or 100 other places you theoretically could see an ad, there's a high chance it goes into Tenstreet. Or if I talk to you on the phone and then you fill out an application, that goes into Tenstreet. Tenstreet basically takes all those ads, the thousands that come in, and organizes it. So a recruiter can very quickly, I have 20 people to call. These are the locations I'm calling first based off of our operational needs, one by one, and it organizes something that without it would be just absolute chaos. And in a nutshell, that's what Tenstreet is. From beginning to end, then it organizes it. And hey, if we weren't a partner today, it also gives us the ability to go back and call you in 6 months and say, hey, you said you wanted dedicated. I didn't have dedicated, but now I do. Are you still interested in dedicated? It gives you that versatility. It's a little more complicated than that, but in its simplest form, it allows me to serve a potential driver much better because it's organized.
Well, I want to even expand on that a little bit more, because I've been on the driver's side, and what's beneficial about Tenstreet is it houses their application, so as it progresses, a driver can add to it, and instead of the old days where you'd have to fill out from top to bottom the entire app, you could do an app in essentially 2 minutes as long as you remember to put in your updates. And then they got the Pulse system, so carriers can directly communicate with the drivers through it. And it just makes it easier to communicate. And if you utilize it correctly as a carrier, you're not beating down the drivers like you used to on Craigslist ads, reposting every 10 minutes. It's a tool that can be utilized for the benefit of both the speed of hire and to speed to lead.
The auto-populate's probably the most important thing for a driver. The average application takes about 45 minutes to go through if you had to do it from start to finish. Yep. Again, if you talk to 8.3 other people, 45 minutes times 8 times ends up being an unbelievable challenge.
Yeah.
Where if you have it already in there and you've applied to one of the 1,100 plus carriers, I think was the number I heard, that were using Tenstreet and the application fully, not including a larger network for verifications. If you can do it in less than 15 minutes and get through those 8, it goes a lot quicker. And truth be told, that's what you want to do. You want to have those conversations as quickly as possible so you can get the answers as a driver.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So before we wrap this up, because I know there's a lot of exciting content being dropped out there and you want to get out there and make sure you don't miss it. If you had one piece of advice to give today's drivers on how to utilize what they have to position themselves in the best way to get the next best thing for themselves, what would it be?
Know what your priorities are. Know what your priorities are when you have a conversation with any driver. And I think the contest you have on here, where we have to come on and persuade a driver in our way of thinking here, and they score us based on the number of trucks that we get, is a good point on that. Is literally, no, I'm going into these conversations and I need to find A, B, C. If you go into the conversation knowing that, not just having a conversation and seeing who can woo you, you come into it with a purpose, you're going to be much more satisfied with the results. Whereas you blindly look at jobs and just want to get wooed, you're spending a very large amount of your life doing that. And I can't imagine looking for a job every week. I just couldn't do that.
Well, if you're that guy with Prime Ink tattooed on his arm, you'd have a sleeve by the end of the year.
You know, Robert, before we let you go, because I know you're a returning guest multiple times on this, and you got the shades on, I would like to hear a "I'll be back" kind of thing. You know, really well done for our viewers.
I'll be back.
Very nice.
He didn't even prep second.
That was it. Nailed it.
Smooth. Now we have Doug Smith from Covenant. And Doug, you're here in Vegas, so you must be feeling lucky. And now you're on cents per mile, so you're on a winning streak. I'd go hit the craps table.
It's definitely a winning streak. You know, it being here just among our industry peers, and then the invitation to join the two of you guys on this. It's definitely a compliment. So thank you.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate you being on. So you were at Covenant. You guys are one of the icons out there. Tell us what sets Covenant aside from everyone else. What do you guys got going on?
So again, Covenant's been in business just a little bit over 37 years. And so we legacy are a team OTR environment. But one of the things that's really started to separate us over probably the last 3 to 5 years is we've focused more away from the you call, we haul style of business, right? Like playing the bid board and so on, but really moving more into a dedicated focus. So right around 2/3 of our business now is dedicated focus. So we do still have the one-way traffic. Hey, can you help us get a load here? A lot of that is also supported by our brokerage arm. So we've got a 3PL inside the enterprise, but then we've also got a lot of regional. We've got a lot of loop routes and out and backs that really allow a better home time option. So we've really moved from about 3 to 3.5 weeks of out being home to over the last probably couple of years, we've moved to that 2.5 to 3. So it doesn't sound like much, but getting home every 2.5 weeks versus every 3.5 weeks.
It doesn't sound like much when you haven't been on the driver's side, but I remember going out as a driver and as a student, and it was a month to a month and a half commitment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what it was. And you said you got to pay your dues. So it seems like Covenant's working in the direction of, hey, listen, we understand you need to have balance and we want to make trucking look sexy again. And this is our way of doing it. And I mean, that's a substantial difference from what I came into. If I was a student coming out of school and I'm looking at Covenant, what should I be looking for as to make me want to make that leap and come over to Covenant?
So again, 2/3 of all the drivers that we hire every year are students. And so 60% of our driving population is students at any time. So we do have drivers. We've got trainers. We've got one of the best, OJT on the job training programs that are out there. So there's a couple different things when I go out and I talk to schools and I have the opportunity to present to students. I give them, a couple scenarios. One, if it's a single, you're going to come in, you have the option to go out with just you and a trainer. And you can go out, you can do your 145 hours, you can learn, and then move forward from there. If you are coming in with a family member, cousin, brother, dad, mother, sister, best friend, or whatever, or if they wind up meeting somebody in school and they're like, hey, you know what, we could team together, they can come in and do what we call a buddy plan. And then you would have both students on one truck with a trainer. Now, our master trainers are the only ones that do this. So our highest level driver trainers are the ones that can manage this, this 3-person truck.
So, all right. So now I got to hop in here because I've been doing driving for some time. I'm a master. So if I wanted to team with Paul, I can come to Covenant?
Yeah. So that brings in something else, what we call a family plan, right? So if Paul is a new graduating student or does not have, let's say 3 months experience or so, right? If he comes in, but you're an experienced driver, right, and you meet our requirements, we call that a family plan. So your application, your recruiter would work with safety, get you approved, say, hey, he's got this experience, he's got a clean MVR, clean driver record, he's got a winter season under his belt. He would get approved, and then you wouldn't go with a Covenant trainer. You would go out with Charles.
Oh, that's nice.
And so then what happens is you spend your 145 hours training with Charles, but now we've already got a pre-made team.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And since it's the family plan, do I get to put them on my tax plan as well?
That's up to you guys. We don't get that.
All right.
I'll be the pet hanging in the cab also.
Yeah. So, do you have a pet policy?
We do have a pet policy.
How important and how extensive is the training at Covenant versus just kind of out there?
ABC code down the street,
right?
Doing a 2-week training and churning you
like one
students
of,
at a time.
Yeah, like one of those driver mills, basically.
Yeah, no, and great question, and it's one that we do get. Is so one with our students, we primarily bring in from about we've got quite a few school partnerships across the country, and so we're familiar with their program. We're familiar with what they're learning and teaching fundamentals, so they're learning the blocking and tackling of what it is to be a trucker. What our role is when they come in is the 145 hours that they're going to spend with a trainer is teaching them how to be a trucker.
So with that, do you have the availability of female trainers?
Yes.
Because that's a super hot topic in that range too that usually gets overlooked by the driver mills.
Yeah, absolutely. So Covenant, we pride ourselves. I think the industry average is in that 10 to 12% as far as female professional drivers. The last count I saw at the end of this past quarter, we were at about 18.5%.
So you're above the industry average.
We're above it, and we have been for a very long time. We have a specific program called Women in Covenant. It's got their own, they've got their own social media and so on, and it's a network where we have some of our female professional drivers they're just pages, and they can go in and ask questions and so on. We've got representation. We have the Women in Trucking, so Ellen Voy's organization, we have ambassadors, in our fleet that represent women in trucking. So it is very, very powerful. It is very, very present, and it is very, very much an initiative and something that we're prideful on, but at the same time, excited to continue to grow that as well.
So I think that's important because you've made a team inside the team, which again points towards the theory of doing this for retention-minded long term. And as a company, that's how you're going to save money. You don't need to nickel and dime the drivers along the way. You can do it the right way. It might not be instant results, but when it's done, it looks much like this. Speaking of doing things the right way, with me being in Chattanooga, I got to come check out some of the cool stuff you guys had going on. And Hogan Hall, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. So Hogan Hall is the product, in addition to a little bit of the training center that we were just talking about, is the end of a $15 million investment in our professional drivers. It is named after Joey Hogan, who is recently is retiring and has served as president of Covenant for a long time, but he has always been driver focused. And so when the opportunity came to bring our housing and our dormitory on campus, Hogan Hall was built. We have 100 double occupancy rooms. We've got vending that's available 24/7. You've got outdoor activities. You saw the outdoor space that's there.
It was massive and beautiful.
3 meals a day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner served at and it's not just a grab and go. It's actually cooked and prepared meals.
Nice.
And laundry facility. And again, state of the art. So you've got in-room entertainment. Again, it's not just 3 channels.
No.
It's you can cast your device. Like if you're at a hotel, right? You can cast your device to the TV. Wi-Fi enabled all over the place. And then again, it's literally right across the driveway from the orientation building. Orientation building's got 4 state-of-the-art rooms. So it's all right there. And the feedback, it's been open for a little over a month now, and just the feedback has been amazing.
If I was a driver and I wanted to work for Covenant, how do I do this?
You go to drive4covenant.com, and you just check it out. It'll have all the current information. We're going to start uploading information about Hogan Hall will be on there. Current pay scales are always on the website. The most current information is always there, and you can apply directly, from that. And again, experienced driver, it'll preload your app through the Intelli app and so on. But if you're a student driver, you're interested, we've got a student page. Operation Victory is our military program, so that's something else maybe we talk about another time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on, but it's very, very easy. Driveforcovenant.com, click apply here or seek more information. And just because you apply doesn't mean you have to come work. It just allows you to talk to one of our recruiters, or what I like to call our career counselors.
It wouldn't be a user conference without talking to fellow industry professionals. And when I say that, I mean, there's some that have been around forever. And we got Greg Iverson with Cook. Greg, I mean, you are a pillar of this place.
Been around forever. You don't make me sound that old.
I know, right?
I mean, you make old look good, though.
Silver fox.
I appreciate that.
I mean, come on. We've seen and talked to each other over the years. You're definitely one of those people that when I'm in a room and I see an opportunity to have a talk with somebody, I know I'm going to walk out of there knowing more than what I walked in with.
I hope it's important stuff. But it's something.
Right.
Yeah, I actually started driving in 1980.
So was that weird? Like you just started driving, and then like immediately after you started driving, the Motor Carrier Act of 1980 happened. So like you thought you knew what you were doing, and everything just got
Turned upside down.
Exactly. So I worked for a little company in Minneapolis, and I started driving a straight truck. And then one day, the guy that drove the tractor trailer called in sick. So the owner said, "Take that load of paint down to the construction site." And I said, "I don't know how to do that." And he said, like trucking owners do, "The F in the truck and go." I said, "Okay." And then I learned how to do it. And then I got grandfathered in like I knew what I was doing.
My father went the same way. So it's funny when you start hearing people that have been in this a long time and how it was versus how it is now. And so you're over at Cook. I mean, tell us a little bit about Cook and what you do there.
So I've done some other things in the career. I managed a Teamster fleet in Minneapolis. I've done safety and operations, and then I kind of settled in. Cook called me one day and said we had an opening for a recruiter, actually, and I said, "Okay, let's talk about that." So I was going to get hired, and then about a week before I was supposed to start, they called me and said, hey, by the way, how'd you feel about running the department? And I said, seriously,
It's trucking.
seriously. And I said, what? You know, I remember the conversation where I said, I haven't done a lot of this. And they said, no, it's good. Come on, take it.
It's easy. We just hire people.
Yeah,
It's not like there's entire conferences that cover this thing.
right. So I went and took, and which was really kind of cool because I could take everything right from the ground and make my own program.
And you did.
And we did. And, you know, I kind of settled in. I wasn't sure I was going to stay in recruiting, but I kind of found a spot. And to me, you know, it's about, I feel like I'm bringing guys to a good home, right?
Mhm.
Men and women.
Yeah.
Recruiting can change people's lives.
Well, it can, for the good or the bad. I mean, if you do it wrong, you've changed someone's life because they've made a choice to buy into what you had and they didn't buy goods. And if you do it right, you're forming relationships. Like I hire people for a living now too, and I drove, and I still talk to them. They call me. They talk about their families, wish me happy birthday. I mean, there is things that happen when you do this right that is so rewarding. And it goes back to how I introduced you, you know, just my conversations with you. You're a very genuine person. You don't mind passing on wisdom to people. It's not like, hey, this is my Big Mac sauce. You don't need to know the recipes.
There's no secrets out here.
Oh, but I think there's also a lot to be said about you being able to sleep at night. Like, I know me personally, you know, spend time as a recruiter. You guys have obviously in recruiting, you know, like, or even like one time I went to go shoot a video for a company and I started interviewing the owner and I saw the conditions of the drivers and I was like, I'm not making this video because no one should land here. So you actually feel like you're at a company where you can sleep at night, knowing like you're putting people at a place that you think is okay.
I'm glad it's because I've used that phrase a lot of times. I like to sleep at night.
Yeah.
So, you have your credibility and your ethics, and I like to sleep at night.
So one of our conversations, and it's a constant point when we have various conversations about various topics, is the retention over at Cook. I mean, not just on the driver's side, but in the office side, in the recruiting department. I mean, we've had these conversations. People are trying to figure this out, and here you're open book to people. They have conversations with you all the time, and they feel much like I do. I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
So I've been around there 18 years. And we've got fleet managers that have been there 30, 20. I think the average of our fleet managers is probably 10 years there.
One of the things that stands out, and I know I'm going to hit you left field here, was you haul fun.
We kind of settled into a niche where we haul specialty items, boats, four-wheelers, golf carts, ATVs.
Nice.
And it's all, you know, and for the drivers, it's a lot of it's a little physical stuff. You know, it's not for everybody, but it's fun. These guys
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff.
I turned to you for advice when I needed it. So if you wanted to give our drivers advice on, you're talking to a recruiter, what should you be paying attention to? What should you be asking them?
If a driver was calling my company, well, what I tell drivers to do is ask about, like you're just talking about, the stability of the leadership team. It's because what's the thing we bust down our drivers about? Jobs, right?
Yeah.
Number of jobs. And I always tell them, turn it around, talk to the company, see how long has your recruiting manager been there? How long has the fleet manager's been there? How long whoever you want to talk about, and you should talk about the recruiters. How long have they been? Figure out if it's not stable inside.
You're going to be stable outside.
You're not going to have a good time.
It's not going to end well.
When you're talking to a driver, you said flip the script. Ask them, what's it look like inside? But if you had to pick one thing that if a recruiter did, a driver should just abandon ship, what would it be?
People talk about the recruiters. You know, it's a conversation. Sometimes driver or recruiters will misspeak. You know, there's people say it's a red flag. You know, I don't know. It's some of that's just conversational stuff.
So in my experience, like being a driver and a recruiter, we all have our pet peeves. For me, what it was if you told me, if you were bold enough, if you didn't say nothing, I didn't hold it against you, but if you were bold enough to say, I promise you I'm going to do this. I'm going to call you tomorrow. And you didn't call tomorrow, hey, guess who's not answering the day after?
Right. That's fair.
You mentioned earlier something about flipping the script. I heard down the grapevine you had some questions for our gentleman on the podcast. Would you like to ask them?
That's not how this works.
He said he wanted to flip it around.
You know, I was kind of I like to do it ahead of time because I like to know who I'm talking to, and you know, and questionable audience.
Yep, that's fair.
But what's your walk-on song?
Should I stay or should I go by The Clash?
Back in Black.
Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On.
I knew somebody throw out Celine.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile today. We're going to end this on a high note, unlike most people in Vegas. So I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
Most people like Charles. I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.